Shut up! Welcome back to Conversations with Carol and Cheryl. Today we are joined with attorney Andrew and his sister, Dr. Lynn. We are going to focus on the emotional side of elder care. I just want to note here that Andrew and Lynn's mom was diagnosed with Lewy Body Dementia. Andrew will get more into the disease in the middle of this episode. For more information, there is a link in our show description. Andrew.
Thank you, Carol. Yeah, this was important to me when Carol invited me on the podcast to share the experience that my family went through with respect to our mother. Passed away in the summer of 2018. The progression of our experience really began in 2016 when we started recognizing symptoms of the illness that eventually took our life. What we first wanted to talk about are some of the big picture emotional issues, and then we'll get into some of the more specific medical issues, some of the things you need to know, some of the legal issues, the practical issues, and lastly, some of the struggles that we went through after our mother passed away, dealing with the estate, and throughout the process, dealing with two particularly difficult family members, one sibling and that sibling's new spouse, who presented some extraordinary difficulties.
How many siblings do you have?
I'm the youngest of 5. I've got 4 older sisters, 3 of whom, with myself, were very, very close throughout this process, as I'll get in more detail. One of whom has struggled with mental illness most of her adult life. Coincident with my mother's getting sick, she ended up spontaneously getting married to a gentleman who was an equally troubled personality. Just so everyone understands, and I live in the Washington, D.C. area. Our parents lived on Cape Cod. That's about 500 miles from where I lived. Lynn, my sister who's on the podcast, lives about 250 miles from Cape Cod. We were the most remotely located, and the sibling we had, he has mental illness, and her equally troubled husband lived right down the street from our mother. We had to pull a lot of strings, push a lot of strings, was extraordinarily frustrating at times, emotionally overwrought at times. But anyway, what I did want to first talk about, notwithstanding our own experience, is some of the emotional issues that your audience and everyone listening that you're going to have to be dealing with as your parents age. And the first thing you need to understand as you approach this issue is there's no instruction manual. It's just like raising children. No one can hand you an instruction manual. You sort of have to figure things out. You've got to be a really good listener with respect to your friends, colleagues, and so forth. Try to figure out what the good advice is. Try to prepare for problems before they occur. The one thing you really need to do is be forgiving of yourself, because as elderly people age, as they get sick, you need to make decisions on their behalf. You need to make decisions on your own behalf. And it's a least worst decision often. The best decision you're making is the least worst decision. So you are making the best possible decision you can make, but it still results in a horrible feeling and sometimes an undesirable outcome. But you need to forgive yourself for that. You need to realize that if you're in an untenable situation, a difficult situation, sometimes the best choice you can make still has a nasty feeling to it. That's why it was really important for us, for me and my 3 sisters, for us to be really supportive as we made those difficult decisions. Just emphasize that you're doing the right thing. Don't be hard on yourself. I want everyone who's listening to continue to approach this issue. If you're dealing with this issue, you need to be forgiving of yourself, because if you're not, the anxiety involved with this process can just be overwhelming. The other thing I wanted everyone to understand up front, and it's just going to be a theme throughout this, is communication. Communication with your family, communication with your siblings, communication with your parents as you see concerns for them as their health deteriorates. It's going to be two types of communications. It's going to be communications about their health and communications about their financing, and their finances rather. And as I say this, every parent, they're different. Some parents are just clam up when you ask about their money, and some parents are just going to clam up, I feel fine, I'm great, I have never felt better. They're not going to be communicative. So again, this goes back to this notion that there's no instruction manual. Some parents are going to be cooperative and collaborative and work things through, and others, you're not going to hear about issues until the disaster's at your front door. And again, that goes back to forgiving yourself, making the least worst choice, and just rolling up your sleeves and going day by day with it. The next thing I just wanted to mention in terms of the emotional issues, you need to learn how to be an advocate. Advocate legally, advocate medically. And I particularly say this, and I think Lynn can add something to this, is, Lynn's a pediatrician. She's not a geriatric specialist. And some of the doctors we took our mother to didn't understand what her problem was. They were great doctors in other respects, but you need medical specialists who are used to seeing elderly people and who are used to seeing elderly people with the kind of ailments you're spotting in your elderly parent. I can't emphasize that enough. Lynn, I don't know did you have anything to add to that?
No, I would just say that even though our parents were in the part of a country where access to healthcare is readily available, it was still difficult to find good geriatric providers and good specialists who would be able to take care of our mom well. That being said, in different parts of the country, the access to care is much less than it is in Massachusetts. Massachusetts is one of the places where there's the most outstanding access to care, excellent health care. So I can only imagine what the struggles other people outside of the New England area or the Washington, D.C. area have with their parents. And then as our population ages and also people are starting their own families until later, they're be in a situation where they're going to have kids who need them, their own children need them, but also they're going to have aging parents at the same time. So that's an enormous stress right there. People have to take care of themselves as well. And self-care and wellness is so important.
Did you find some of these doctors brushed off your mom because of her age?
I think a lot of her symptoms were attributed to aging and grieving, and certainly that was intertwined. So it was difficult. It was a difficult diagnosis, I would say. And then brushing off like, oh, that's just aging. Any kind of behaviors are brushed off, not just in older people, like, oh, he's just a boy. That's just being a boy. Or they're just jealous, or that kind of thing is brushed off all the time. I would say even the geriatric specialists were not as astute as I think they should have been.
Yeah, I asked because I found that with my dad. That's why.
And it's a point that I think we can explore further when we talk more specifically about the medical issues. Just so your audience knows, my mother was diagnosed with and died from a disease called Lewy Body Dementia. A Lewy body is a protein deposit in the brain that builds up and it prevents one part of your brain from communicating effectively with the other. Over 1 million people suffer from it. No one's heard of it. It just seems like no one has heard of it.
I've never heard of it.
Ted Turner, the billionaire who founded CNN, is suffering from it right now. The disease that Robin Williams had when he committed suicide. That's why he committed suicide. It wasn't because he was sad. It's because he had a horrible progressive illness. He just decided, no, I'm not going to live through to the end.
You get the proper diagnosis.
We saw the symptoms. some of the symptoms of Lewy body dementia, and it's different than Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's, you think of somebody who is potentially able-bodied, who can walk around, but they don't recognize anybody, and they've got no short-term memory. Our mother's symptoms were presenting as something that looked like a supercharged version of Parkinson's. She had the shakes. She had a lot of difficulty sleeping at night. She started acting out dreams, meaning hallucinating a little bit. She was drooling. So she would sit in a chair, watch the TV news, and then you just notice a little bit of drool coming down off her mouth. But she could have a lucid conversation. She could tell you what she had for breakfast that morning. She could tell you who she spoke to. So you're not adding that up to dementia, but it is a specific type of dementia. It's the second most common type of dementia, and it's progressive. We first saw the symptoms presenting in 2016, and she eventually died, as I mentioned, in the middle of 2018. Now, some people can live up to 7 years with Lewy body dementia or even longer. Hers, because she was not afflicted until her late 70s, seemed to progress quicker. And as I'm going to get into in more detail, the end is excruciating. It's a horrible disease. Again, what I wanted to refocus on before getting into more detail in the medical stuff is some of the emotional issues that people can deal with now. When you're meeting as a family, things you need to consider is if your elderly loved one needs to leave the house, who do they live with? I mean, is there somebody nearby who can put them up in their house and take care of them? In our case, our parents lived in a house that they built. They were very proud of that house. They loved that house, and they refused to leave. And this is one of the really difficult emotional issues, and it's very, very common. As you see deterioration mentally, as you see deterioration physically, convincing your parents that the least worst decision is selling their beloved house and going to a facility or going somewhere like with one of their children to get more care, to get the care that they need. And it's very difficult to do. Other things that are related to this is that generation, that World War II generation, our parents, they're in their late 70s, 80s, and 90s. They accumulate tchotchkes, accumulate large, heavy pieces of brown furniture, and they don't want to be told that that stuff has very little demand now. Meaning, yeah, it's beautiful. It's a piece of oak or piece of beautiful maple or walnut furniture. It's well made. It's well crafted. Your Hummel figurines are so German and beautiful, but there's so many more people trying to sell those things than buy them, that the value has just tanked. If you've got parents in this situation, or if you in fact are in this situation, the greatest gift you can give your children is figuring a way to get rid of that stuff. Like now, right? As long as you're lucid, because it's hard for them to hear, but nobody wants it. Or I should more accurately say, the amount of people who want those things is so much smaller now than the amount of people who want to get rid of them. Downsizing, decluttering. My goodness, that's a gift you can give your adult children if you can start getting rid of your stuff while you're still physically and mentally able to do it.
How do the children navigate this? Because the parents are pushing back.
It's a generational thing, like Andrew said. It's a generational thing. So if they have this little figurine, a Hummel, after the Depression, that shows, they have some disposable income. And so they've arrived. That has a lot of meaning to them. And us never having lived through that time, it's different.
I guess it would be like us getting our phones taken away. We'd freak out.
I think it would.
Yeah.
Yes. Especially for maybe even like a better analogy is a teenager having their phone taken away.
Right. Or the Xbox.
What we had to do was, our mother's health deteriorated to such a point we had to get her out of her house. She didn't enjoy this when we had to find a facility for her. And during this process, I called up a dumpster rental company We had what I called family dumpster weekend, which is all of my, nephews and nieces who are like late teens, early 20s. We all got together at my parents' Cape Cod house. Father passed away in 2012, by the way. So it was just my mother in the house, but my parents built that house. Myself, the nieces and nephews, some of my siblings, we all got together and we just went through the basement, which was just full of stuff. Told everyone, if you could not sell this for $5 at a yard sale, in the dumpster it goes. And that's what we did. We just, over 3 days, we just cleaned up everything. We filled up 2 18 cubic yard dumpsters full of stuff. And then there was still a house full of large brown furniture left. And several months later, as we were closing on the house, Lynn had to hire a haul away company just to take away we had to pay them to take it away. Mm-hmm. We simply ran out of time. I mean, ideally, you'd go on eBay or have an estate sale and get some money for that stuff. Life doesn't wait. Life, you can't plan. We just had to hire a company just to come in. I think we paid them about $2,000 to just come in and haul away whatever was left so the house is clean for the new owners.
When I cleaned out my parents' house, we did have a guy, the real estate agent brought in a guy that does a lot of stuff on eBay. And we had a lot of large brown furniture too that we thought was nice. He walked around the house, he didn't take anything. He was just like, nah, there's really nothing here. So we had all kinds of stuff, like everybody. But anyway, I was surprised. So even eBay doesn't want a lot of this stuff, because like you said, it's not worth anything anymore.
People who are furnishing their house now, they don't want large brown armoires. They don't want curio cabinets full of tchotchkes. Mm-hmm. It's just, there's no demand for it. And when you have such an emotional attachment to those things, it's very devastating to be told that the things that they've accumulated throughout their whole life, they probably paid good money for it at some time, to tell them, look, they're beautiful things, but no one else wants them. Or like the value you think that you can attribute to those, there is no market value for that that's comparable to what your emotional value is. You're never going to get what you think you should get for those things. Again, that's one of the emotional struggles we had to go through, not only watching our mother's health deteriorate, but just filling up dumpsters. Roll up your sleeves, spit in your hands, and get to work. I can't reiterate this enough. It's the least worst choice. Mm-hmm. My mom's there crying. My mom's crying and weeping as we're tossing stuff in the dumpster. But this has to get done. You feel like a jerk because your mom's in there weeping.
You couldn't take her to McDonald's and get her some nuggets while you were in the dumpster?
Yeah, avoidance of the situation would reduce the anxiety, definitely. I tried with our mom saying, thank you to the thing. You brought me joy. No, let it go. That didn't work at all. Taking a picture of things, some people do that. And then letting it go, I think that might be helpful. But I think your suggestion of bringing the person somewhere, getting rid of the stuff, and then we come back home, they don't really even notice that much what's gone.
Is that the key?
That would have been a great idea. At that point in time, it was hard to get my mother into a car because she was so stressed out about everything. This is someone who would be pressing the emergency brake if you went. She would have like an imaginary brake, and she's stomping the ground next to you as you're driving her if you're going over 20 miles an hour. Getting her out of the house, driving around it was a task at the time. You can't plan for the deterioration. You can't plan for how fast it's going to take. We were trying to do family meetings, emails, and so forth. And as we're planning, her illness was accelerating past our plans. Wow. Okay. You just get into almost like a triage mode.
Do you think you will start getting rid of your stuff?
100%.
Yeah, that's how I feel. Like what you see is what I have. I told my kids too. I had a talk with them. I said, if you have to throw my stuff in garbage bags, don't feel that, you're putting mom's stuff in a hefty bag. Do it. Do it.
Yeah,
throw away my clothes. Don't hang on to my stuff. Right. Please get rid of it any way, shape, or form, and grieve how you want to grieve. Don't let anyone tell you that you're not grieving right. If you want to go out and have a beer, go. If you want to stay home and cry, do it. But anyway, I just was wondering, like, if you felt that strongly too, like I did, that I sure as hell will do what I say.
You've got the financial planning. We all work for an employer who offers us a pension. Financially, we might not live like kings and queens, but we're not going to eat cat food either. So we got that. We've got some of our health care taken care of. From the experience with my own parents, I do not accumulate stuff.
Right, neither do I.
I mean, I
That.
donate something to the Goodwill every year. Just a car full of stuff. If I haven't worn something in a year, it's gone. Tchotchkes. I'm not a tchotchke person. What can I say?
Right.
But I think back to what you were saying about the generation, those
Right.
Hummels had meaning. That was a symbol.
It was a symbol. My understanding of those tchotchkes is it dates back to World War II. As soldiers were coming home from Europe, they were bringing home those German and Austrian and French ceramic figurine. It was not just, I'm now middle class.
Mm-hmm.
It was also, this is part of their war experience. And my father, he was in the Air Force during Korea, and he brought back a bunch of stuff. He was stationed in Libya, among other places. So he had those Royal Dalton mugs, they look like a giant head. Those things used to scare the crap out of me as a kid. As you have family meetings, communicate with each other too about who's good at what. Lynn was the doctor. We deferred to her on the medical stuff. People deferred to me on the legal stuff and some of the transactional stuff, handling the bank account and so forth. I had another sister who ended up living about a quarter mile from my mother when she was in assisted living. She was like the nurturer. She was the effective nurse, nurturer, real caregiver of the families. You just figure out what everyone is good at, and hopefully everyone in your family will step up and say, I can do this. I can handle this. I can handle that.
So did you have a leader?
I would generally organize and facilitate the family meeting. It was very important for me that decisions get made, but I not impose on people.
So you facilitated and kind of led.
Well, I wanted to get from A to B. What's my goal? We're at A, let's get to B. Not unlike our work office environment when you're dealing with like a room full of lawyers. Try to get a room full of lawyers to agree on anything.
Right.
It's never going to happen.
Yep.
But you can still get from A to B. That's what we tried to do. And, as I will get into in more detail, we had one sibling who was really troubled, and she just dug her heels in.
There's one in every family.
One in every family. Well,
I'm probably
there is.
it.
I have yet to meet the equal of my sister and her husband in terms of launching personal attacks and emails and
God.
digging their heels in and making accusations and so forth.
That person that wants to try and make you feel as bad as possible,
Right.
Picking the least
You
worst
make the least
decision.
worst choice, and they want to.
Yeah.
They want
But
to.
they won't make it.
Right. It's like you have to eat like a poop omelet or a poop taco. There's your choice. And then they're like, it tastes horrible. Like, we don't have a choice. It's either a poop omelet or a poop taco. That's our choice.
It can be exasperating, but I think what Andrew was talking about, having an agenda and just a short agenda and getting from A to B, B to C, C to D. Okay, let's wrap it up. This is what we talked about. Everybody in agreement. Great. And then move on. And then there will be more family meetings, be it over email or in person, but it's a moving target.
How wonderful that you had cooperating siblings except for the one, and that you did everything and had agendas. I mean, oh my God.
Well, we had agendas, Cheryl, but it wasn't that wonderful at the time. I mean,
Right, but I mean, I'm the youngest of 5.
Okay, are you?
And nobody went along with what I had to say. They thought I was so cool. They weren't going to give me any alternative except extras. The idea that you guys could even communicate and everything like that is just wonderful.
That was a definite plus. I would say that you have to face it, say, let's have a meeting. I would strongly recommend that the siblings alone attend, not grandchildren, not spouses, not significant others, that it's just about the kids with their parent at that time at the first meeting, because they are the ones who have the biggest stake in it.
Yeah.
Really good advice.
Right.
Put your foot down with that.
Yeah. I mean, there might be rare examples where you've got a grandchild who's like the primary caregiver. I think what Lynn said there is spot on, and that's not what happened in our own personal experiences. We did have a family meeting. My sister's new husband showed up, decided to try to run things after being married to my sister for 3 months. And that went over like a lead balloon. As we depart the emotional component of this, just acknowledge if you're a caregiver, you're going to have burnout. Related to that is as you see your loved one deteriorating and after they pass away, you're grieving while tasking, cleaning out the house, dealing with stuff, seeing your loved one deteriorate and waste away in front of your eyes. The grieving process begins before they're deceased. I don't want to say it's unnatural, but it is not the ideal situation for you to be busy as hell while you're seeing somebody that you love die, and after they're dead, to go through a lot of rigmarole with their own estate. I think that the more desirable thing is for you to be able to meditate and grieve and have some time to yourself without stress. So you can just contemplate your loss and be as sad as you need to be for as long as you need to be and then come out of it. My own situation, I think Lynn will agree too, because she probably went through the same thing, was I was tasking all the time. So I could not properly grieve my mother. And that leaves a little hole in my soul, which is also why it's so important for me to be able to talk about this to your audience. Is you need to, as a caregiver, be forgiving of yourself. Be able to take time away and just contemplate within your own thoughts to try to recover, because it is daunting. Being a caregiver is daunting. Being a caregiver of someone with dementia can be exponentially daunting because they're attacking you. It's not the same. You're taking care of somebody who isn't the same person that you've loved your whole life.
What advice do you have for the other family members? How can they support the caregiver?
First, acknowledge to the caregiver that they're doing amazing things. Don't just ever be dismissive of them. Just say, look, we appreciate so much what you're doing every day. To the extent that you can give them any support, give them a few days off.
So for the caregiver, they need to take that time and not feel guilty too.
Exactly.
So just take a break and allow that to happen.
Exactly.
And even if you're doing nothing, but maybe going and grieving and being in a quiet space, you don't have to set up a play date with your girlfriends or necessarily travel to another state. Just take little mini breaks.
I think respite care is really important, and that should be part of the family meeting at any point. Some people are too proud to acknowledge that they need it. Families should realize that a caregiver burnout is real and not ignore it, because ignoring it isn't going to make it go away. It's going to make it worse.
Right, and that caregiver also is usually giving the dosing and doing stuff like that, so you don't want them confused or tired or...
So dovetailing on what Carol had mentioned about how you can support the primary caregiver is financially, if you can find the means for some home nursing. So we're about to get into the medical stuff. Home nursing's not cheap, folks. I mean, if it's not covered by insurance, it's not cheap.
What if the patient doesn't want that? They don't want a stranger in the house. They want their primary caretaker on board 24/7.
Yes, that is my father-in-law, who is now 91, and he will take somebody who's a physical therapist there in the house to help him, or an occupational therapist, especially if they have things in common with him like sports, etc. But he does not want a nurse there. He thinks that they might come and steal things, which is a common fear. And he wants his much younger wife to take care of him.
There's no instruction manual.
Yeah.
If you've got a very stubborn elderly loved one, the best thing you can hope for is family meeting and a united front. Basically saying, united as a family, we understand you want Joe or Mary or whoever to take care of you 24/7. They can't do it. As a united front, we are going to help you get home nursing in here, say 2 hours a day or 15, 20 hours a week, so that your caregiver can go to the store and have a break, go to the coffee shop and be with his or her friends and have a break. There's your poop taco. Here's your poop taco.
Maybe you can also set up activities that the nurse can do with them. Like you want to watch shows or you want to play a game or something like that. I also wanted to say about the grieving real quick. You are definitely, in my opinion, I agree with you, grieving during the whole process. And I think it's normal for some people to feel a lot of relief and not to feel guilty about that as well, because you've done your grieving and nobody wants to live like that. Nobody wants to be seen like that. You don't want to have to see it for much longer, someone deteriorating in front of you. So I know when my dad was like that, my dad was the most modest man in the world. My God, we used to laugh if you almost accidentally walked in on him coming out of a shower or something like that. The lengths you would go to make sure you didn't see anything, And then in the end, I had to change him,
Right.
And I knew that killed him. That's not how I wanted to be. So when he passed, I felt a lot of peace and relief.
It's the suffering. You just don't want to see them suffer. And it's a cruel reality of our existence of life, is that the end isn't always beautiful, profound. It's often there's some suffering as you leave. I miss my parents every day. My father died of a nasty illness too, not quite like my mother did, but in both instances, we were there at the end. We miss them every day, but we're glad that their suffering has ended. I talk about a poop taco on top of a poop taco. And I'm going to get into this. The end is excruciating.
Please join us in our next episode where Attorney Andrew and Dr. Lynn continue conversations around medical advice and lessons learned in caring for their mom.